everyone. This is the TLDR video for week 2, Introduction to Pen Testing and Recon. This week you should learn how to talk about and define the steps of a pen test and the limits of pen testing. You should be able to talk about the rules of engagement and how important they are, as well as the planning stages that are needed for a pen test to work properly. You should also be able to talk a little bit about what footprint means, how to figure out what the footprint is, and talk about some of the tools that would be used during this step. Now, in this particular case, there are activities that I would normally do in class. If we are in class, then we will do the activities there. However, for this public video, I am going to be skipping past some of these activities rather quickly because they are not the kind of thing that we can do remotely. So one of the first things that we can talk about is how to start gathering information. So where we always want to start is non-invasive. When we're talking about doing a pen test, we want to start with the more non-invasive options before we start escalating. Now, non-invasive is going to be things that aren't going to set off red flags. An example of non-invasive information gathering is OSINT, Open Source Intelligence. Now, OSINT you're actually going to see quite a bit of, and one of the things that you'll notice in the Blackboard class, if you're taking the class, is in the web links, I actually have a whole section on search engines beyond Google, as well as some resources in the module and in the web links for how to do OSINT better. There's actually some really nice charts and things of how to be able to do OSINT well. Now, some of the things that we are going to want to look for, we don't want to just, Google the company. So let's say we're doing a penetration test of Acme Corp. We don't want to just Google Acme Corp. That's really not going to give us the information we want. We want to think in a more high-level way, how is Acme Corp put together? And then we want to think about the information that we're trying to find. And then we want to think about what we can find online, what's out there. So we can look at things like cached pages. We can also look for things like specific file types, such as PDFs or Word docs. That might get us a little bit more info. And we want to think about what is visible from the outside? What is the footprint of that company? So what does Acme Corporation look like from the outside? So when we look at the footprint, we're going to see Acme Corp is going to have DNS name servers. What information can we get about that? What IP ranges are they on? Are there any banners that we can grab? Can we figure out things like operating systems or network devices? Now, sort of an odd way to go about this is actually looking at the job postings from the company. So if Acme Corporation is looking for a networking engineer, they are probably going to have some things listed. Now, even if they aren't currently looking for a network engineer, if they have ever looked for a network engineer in the past, we can find the cached pages for those job postings. Then we'd be able to do something like say, okay, well, this job posting is looking for a network engineer that is familiar with Windows Server 2012. Now, that's going to give us some really good insight onto what kind of servers Acme Corp is using, because why would they hire a networking engineer that doesn't have the skills that they need? So now we can make a reasonable guess that Acme Corporation runs Server 2012. So those are some of the kind of ways that you want to think about OSINT is how can you find the information that you need? What are the steps that you can take? And is there any sort of roundabout ways to be doing this? So we might want to look for things like names, job titles. Can we find emails? Can we find financials, company structure? Can we find sort of how they're making their money? How they are put together, any of that information we might be able to find as we are going about doing our OSINT. So Normally in class, we would do a mind map of this. Now, that would involve us sort of having as an activity putting this together. Obviously, we're not going to be doing that at home remotely. Now, some slightly more invasive things that we could start looking at as part of our recon. We could start looking at scraping some data from web pages. So we might be able to find things like metadata. If there are documents posted to the website, who's posting them? If pictures are being posted, did they scrape the metadata properly? Is the EXIF data still there? Who took the pictures? What were they taken with? When were they taken? We could look at job listings. What's listed there? What have they been looking for? How often are they happening? And that can all get us more information about Acme Corporation. Now, DNS Recon, there are some tools that you can start looking at. Now, some of these are a little bit more invasive than others, so I'm not recommending that you do these at home remotely. These are things that I would normally have you do in class and supervised. Now, dig is something where we can actually find some information about the DNS system. Same with Fierce. We can start looking for name servers and alternate name servers. And that's some of the information that we can basically ask about Acme Corporation without setting off any flags. Now, normally in class, I would have a supervised time with some suggested tools. However, that's not going to be happening at home because I can't supervise. So we're going to skip right along to traps. Now, traps or honey traps, the older term was actually honey pot, but honey pot is actually mildly offensive to some people, to majorly offensive to some people. And it's because of the origin of where the term honey pot came from. So if we look at honey traps, what we're trying to see is the other side of the equation of pen testing. So if we started by talking about what information is being shared and what is the footprint of a company and what information is freely out there, the other side of that is how can we protect the information from our company? So let's say, for example, we're looking at email addresses. Now, email addresses are something that some companies will have out there. They make it freely available and they'll share them and they'll share personal email addresses. So they'll have things like, Jane at acmecorp.com, Susie at acmecorp.com, and they'll have those all over the website. Some companies go with more of a like CEO at acmecorp.com, CISO at acmecorp.com, so that it's a general email address rather than a person-specific one. Some of the things that we can do to protect against things like phishing attacks is if we have a lot of the email addresses hidden in some way, it gives us the ability to not show as much information. So let's say, for example, we have somebody who is the CEO of a company. Well, if we have their picture in their bio, which is pretty common, then we could have an email address that is, CEO at whatever it happens to be as the preferred email. And then we could have multiple people looking at it, doing triage, and sending emails to the CEO only when they really need them. If we have a more personalized for the CEO, so let's say our CEO is Jane Doe of Acme Corporation, then if we have Jane at acmecorp.com, then it's a lot easier for people to guess what the other emails are if they are able to find a list. So if they know that it's first name, last name, or first name dot last name, it's easier for them to generate the rest of the email lists. It also gives people the ability to scrape the website to find emails on the website because you can use one of the tools to find that really quickly. Now, one of the ways we can figure out if somebody has tried to scrape our website for email addresses is we can actually have emails that would only be seen by scrapers rather than people. For example, white text on a white background. You might end up only seeing if you are scraping or using one of the website readers, or if you have email addresses in the code of the website, but completely hidden from everybody else that's actually going to the website. That's one of the ways we can use that as kind of a trap, because if we are getting emails to that address that's hidden, we know it's not a real person that actually went there and found it. We can also do things like break out the email address. So rather than jane@doe.com and having the at symbol and the .com, we can actually write it out. So instead of the at symbol, we can have space at space. We can write out the .com part, so we can actually say DOT space COM. We can do things like hide her name, like I was talking about before. And these are some of the ways that we can protect our employees against these tactics of scrapers. Now, when we end up having all of this, one of the things that is really important with any variety of pen testing and security is reporting. Now, before you say anything, I know reports are the least fun portion of anything. However, reports are incredibly important because we have to be able to share what we found with other people. Now, one of the things that we'll see from pen testing is there's actually several different tools that have been set up specifically to be able to gather multiple pieces of information in multiple formats. What I mean is, let's say you're putting together a Word document. Now, everybody's probably written at least one paper in their lives, probably at least, 4 or 5 pages. If you've had to do that in Word, you know that it's not the best thing, but it's not the worst. However, if you've ever had to do, say, a 20 or 30 page paper, you know that Word makes you want to scream. Now, this is still just talking about text, not even other things. So one of the things that penetration testers have done and security report people have done is they have actually made some tools such as Magic Tree and Dratus that will actually help generate the report for you. So you can get all of this information. Like you can find all of the info from the DNS name servers. We can find some of the social media info. We can scrape some information from the website, and all of those different formats of information that are coming in, we can actually put into one of these reporting structures, such as Dratus, and then it will help us generate the report by pulling the information that we have and giving it a nice organization. Now, normally in class, I have people use Dratus. Some people have had a hard time installing it and getting it set up. I have found that the documentation has been better than Magic Tree. However, if you would like to try either Magic Tree or Dratus, you can try this at home. And this is sometimes built into Kali, sometimes not, but is normally a relatively easy install. So I'll use Dratus as the example. So what'll end up happening is it'll actually give you a very different layout for how the report is being generated. You're going to use something called nodes instead of folders. Issues is going to be any vulnerabilities that you found, such as websites that are freely available or email addresses that are freely available on the website. Methodologies is going to be the checklists that you followed and the timelines that you're following. So that's basically how you are doing your pen test. And then the other thing that's kind of nice about this is it uses an IP address, so you can actually share it with others really easily. So if you were on a team doing pen testing, it would give you the ability to write a report and have everybody on the team generate the information. So if you would like to try out either Dratus or Magic Tree, those are actually safe for you to do at home, and you would be welcome to it. And there's really not too much damage that can be done because they can just be uninstalled if it turns into a problem. And so you can actually see how these reports will sometimes be created. So what you want to think about when you're talking about the pen test is the steps that you're going to be taking. Make sure that you are thinking very much about the scope of the pen test, what's allowed and what isn't allowed. And then in the very first recon stages, we want to start trying to figure out the look of the company. How is Acme Corporation put together? Who is in charge? Who's the underling? Do we have a list of who works there, who might be a decision maker, so that as we are starting to think about putting our pen test into action, which we're not actually doing, but if we think about what it would be like if we were, then we would be able to start having a better picture of Acme Corporation. If you want to start thinking about this in a slightly more real life kind of a way, start thinking about it in terms of being a student at Northern Essex. What do you know about Northern Essex? Who is in charge? Who are the decision makers? Who can decide where to spend money or not spend money? And those types of questions are the things that we want to start thinking about. And then the first steps of OSINT is how we can find the answers to some of those types of questions. So, if you have any questions, please let me know.